In terms of the building trades, collective progress is often site preparation disguised as actual construction. Also note that demolition work is not an integral part thereof. Blueprints being linear, men believe reality likewise. Buddha's last girlfriend abandoned him when the new house they were building was completed 2 lifetimes too soon, plus came in 3 dimensions under cost. One man confided, "If I could get my hormones to focus in on a topless stripper the way my consciousness does on life, I'd really have something." Then he added, "Oh, sorry, got it backwards." Fresh description break. Ordinary thoughts are like G-strings and pasties on what could be more naked consciousness. And one guy panted, "Just thinking about having a hotter brain action makes me horny as hell." Data. Data's in the air. Data's in the air. Data's in the very air that you breathe. When it came to entertainment, one guy wouldn't watch any serious drama unless it was funny. And few of them were. Laugh asked local conditions, "What the hell's going on here?" And they replied, "Hey, we just got here." Life itself was pretty carefree until it got involved with the likes of them. As he approached the stadium on a day of special events, a man was heard to say, "There's nothing I enjoy more than seeing the handicapped compete." And a passing philosopher injected, "Then you should come to my office and watch me try to complete the paper I'm working on." The production of the news and other neural reporting. The thing about personal memories and the year in review features is that they're both so cheap to produce. Some human genes wanted to speak out and object. "Hey, you can't talk about my mama like that." But of course they couldn't, and I did. In a world perceived to be dimensionally finite, the history of genetics runs forward as well as back. Same as does time to the left and to the right, and awareness being either here or over there somewhere. An interesting, if not inflammable, aspect of disclosing to routine minds the subject of trans-systemic physics is that not only are they normally unable to hear, to grasp what you're talking about, but even if they did, they don't like it. Yeah. The road. The road's not paved. The road's not paved. Not only that, but it's hardly laid out. In the city, a child speaks his first words. "When I grow up, I want to criticize." And now some foreign news. If you clear up consciousness, you'll clear out your accounts. Conversation. There is something to be said for a singularity, could one be found. I have one. Stock car racing. It is not a metaphor for anything. So, what can be said for it? Well, it's circular. Physics from afar brought blatantly close. Everything three-dimensionally possible is possible in a three-dimensional reality. In addition to the hard sciences, this also has psychological applications as regards what men believe distinguishes the imaginary from the real. Discovering. Don't look far, don't look far, don't look far away. Life admitted to a friend. Yes, it is hard being a role model, but someone has to do it, and I'm all there is. One man started a company called Live and Learn, but it died from stupidity. You didn't own stock in that, did you? Mental explorations end where personal anecdotes begin. Codicillion comment. Weak minds sure do like to talk about themselves. And of course you could say, well, what else they got to talk about? The hand. The cards are dealt. The cards are dealt. They're on the table when you arrived. When asked if he was dead, he shook his head and said, "No, it's simply that my DNA went away." But the attending physician, not being trained in consciousness, could not distinguish such a condition. Those sucked into the genetic triangle find their future consumed by the past. The results of one man's study of certain eco-psycho distribution dynamics within the general human population. Quoting, "Too many people, not enough smarts." In his attempt to make an academic, if not overhead, name for himself, the young professor submitted for consideration a paper entitled "The Brain Chill Factor," but immediately realized his problematic chances for success when the board members accepted his submission, each wearing insulated gloves. The beginning. Wherever you start is just the right spot. Looks like it's definition time. Maturity. Digging the rut even deeper. Off somewhere, some guy thought, you can't be sane unless you're sure who you are. And if you're not sure who you are, you can never grow up. And if that should happen, then, well, I just don't know what to think after that. Once he learned to adjust his watch correctly, Moses began changing snakes into rods. Staffs. Through the medium of local conditions, life asked several of the contestants if they'd like some additional time to think about it. And they said no, that they didn't even want the time they already had. The game. It must be played. It must be played. It can't be won, but it must be played. The topic, the unseen world of communications. The body speaks more than the tongue, only not as loudly. But even if so, how can you call it unseen communications? Man's physical presence is most certainly not invisible. I didn't say invisible, I'm just pointing out that it's not normally seen. A viewer writes, might I be so bold as to offer a personal suggestion as to how you might make your activities popular to a wider audience? If it'll help, I'll mail you my right ear. Stories of three men. One man listened to himself internally comment on the routine affairs of human existence until he wearied of it. Looking in the mirror as he dried himself from his shower, one man thought, I am either destined for fame or to get fat when I'm older. Remember, it's the story of three men. Every 8 years, mused one man to himself. And in a related item, yet another chap said, I used to be three men. The resurrection. Once you're up, you're headed down. Once you're up, you're headed down. You must go up again. There was once a man who, in his speech, would use examples from life to make his point. Life found this so intriguing that it began doing the same with him. If you'll stand up near the curb, you'll find that many of the spectators who heard that will immediately, in their minds, reverse the sequence of the story. In opening the festivities, the voice of the city declared, we are here today to celebrate in our arts the criminal, the crude, the deranged, and uncivil. All of the things we pretend we are not, so as to pretend that we are what we are. And the people cheered wildly. Whereas the ordinary might speak of their achievements, of their achieving a certain aim in terms of luck, the few, as regards the enlightenment, would more likely do so in terms of the inevitable. Once you recognize that you were born holding a ticket to Istanbul, and all that's lacking is having it stamped, what the hell's going to hold you back? Anyway? Choices. Choices, 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 choices. What a simply delightful illusion. Words have no business being serious, thought one man, beyond, watch it! Just as a bibliophile does not consider the cost of a new book an actual expense, nor an enologist a new wine, in a like manner do the more perceptive look upon the mental efforts required for them to become even more so. The secret. There it is, there it is, there it is, all around you. The cause of all human stress is stupidity, and it comes in two forms, your own and the criticism of it in others. And now some sports news. If you clear up consciousness, you'll clear out your debts. By the time every one of Lau's new girlfriends would just begin to understand what he was talking about, he would appear to throw this wild fit and get everything garbled and confused. In a better world, they would then depart and become their own Daldagine. Out of a clear blue Monday, a guy suddenly wondered, if I stopped my continual thinking about what goes on in life, would life continue to go on as it does? Well, guy, one thing's for sure, your mental life wouldn't. Neural music and the tude. A certain singer notes, even if the record label signs you up as a party band, they'll still want you to do a couple of weepers on every album. Seeing. Use your head, use your head. For God's sakes, use your head. Okay. The man thought on. Words have no business being serious past the point of, watch it, next, and hold the onions. The trick, get bigger on the inside than you are on the out. There are those people in life who'd prefer more detailed explanations, just that there are dung flies who are never satisfied with the amount of shit available. Some city-bred neurons wanted to speak up and object. I say, you can't talk about my primary area of interest like that. But they were afraid to, and I did. A man thought, I wouldn't be so down on memory if it didn't so often let me down. But that deserves a bit more consideration, e.g., does his memory actually let him down? Or is it his operation of his memory? And for those of you even further ahead, this, does he even have a memory that is personal to him? The mystic's ear. Hear, hear, the mystic's ear. Don't listen too close or they'll call you home. It came from outer space, the terrifying creature with, no, not the, yes, no, the creature with, no, not the two, the three, no, the terrible creature from the terrible creature with a unified brain. Oh, no! After all that, did I garble it for you? It came from outer space, the terrifying creature with two, wait, not two, no. Three? Not three? Okay. The song. They say it's for you, that they sing it for you. They say it's for you, but it's really for them. And it can't be helped. Looking at the condition of his life, a man thought, I have been consumed by some gigantic creature. The time. The time is now, the time is now, the time is always now. While looking out the window, a man suddenly thought, if it weren't for words, there would be no purely human conflicts. And now, the cry of the intellectual individual amidst the crowd. There is no such cry. The fuel. Produce your own, produce your own. No one's there but you. One actor said to another, the great thing about this job is having a script written for you so that you don't have to worry about what you'll say. And his friend noted the same was true of simply being alive. Although yet to be realized, man's brain is not divided into two major parts, but rather four. And if you get better at it, three. The place. The place is here. The place is here. The place is always here. One guy says that every time he thinks life's about to tell him something really good, he'll end its comments with, but. Words. Words, 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 words. What an escape. What a snare. Life. Life is what happens. Life is what happens. It happens to you. It happens to it. The silence. Why say more? Why say more? What more is there to say? The council asked a certain man if they could study his thought processes, but he had to leave town. The last time, that wasn't the last time, I kept threatening to talk about originality of thought as a kind of mystical discipline. Whilst everyone should by now take the trans-systemic note in regards to that kind of physics, in that there is nothing trans-systemic. So the idea of having originality of thought is somewhat pretentious. Should that stop you? Only reality, only city reality, only reality perceived to be of limited dimensions is actually pretentious. Think about it. If that doesn't clear it up for you, only such people would write a letter to the editor. Only such people would read a newspaper. Only such people would read a newspaper and go, well, I'll be damned. Look what they're doing. That is all the matter of uncontrollable echoes within a closed system. Since everyone is so interested in the idea of progress within a closed system, it's not very hard to do, but it's just a brand new one or fairly recent, since all of you are interested in communications and electronics and paying out your money to very friendly monopolies. I would say progress at the city level, there's a brand new or good new, is just exemplified, does everyone know, your local phone company. And now that you can, for extra amount of money per month, you can get, I think they call it caller ID, which is about a little thing that tells you the number calling. So that you answer the phone or not, but it tells you who's calling or even the name of the person. But, actually that was out for a while. Now for additional monies, now some of you know it, you can buy a blocker so that when you call somebody, it won't work. I'm glad. I personally am glad that Captain Irony is not around to hear this. That might even be too much for him. Poor parochial soul that he is. But see, that's the danger when your intelligence, when your consciousness is limited to the same locale as what appears to be the reality. Your reality, which is, remember, it's your commentary on what life is. That is when you are left. Irony, if you never use the term, irony is just a matter of the day, because you're continually confronted with either thinking, well, God, that's unexpected, which is really the basis of irony, or you can just find whatever it is that strikes your mind, whatever it is that you're observing, to be an absolutely untenable position on someone's part. How dare they do that? Which is just a sort of a soft peddling of the idea of evil forces, because within a closed system, anyone, if your consciousness is likewise limited, if you're simply sitting there with a ticket with which you were born and you never go anywhere else, that the cards are dealt. If you remember the hand news item, the cards are dealt, the cards are dealt. They're on the table when you arrive. And if we were ordinary people, if you were ordinary listeners, you could take that as being some comment probably on fatalism. And if you're ordinary, you would, as a matter of fact, be damn well within your rights. But see how things work. If you were ordinary, and we went along this far, and I said that, then you would get prickly. Yeah. At least by then. You would begin to resist it. Oh, no, so that's it. It's meaningless. But back to the fact that if your consciousness is of the same family structure as the reality into which you were born, if you have made no individual extraordinary effort, no matter how educated you are, no matter anything, your consciousness can never expand beyond the parochial, limited confines of the neighborhood in which you were born, into that reality. Put another way, you will never understand anything. Life never makes any sense. The closest it comes to making sense is you want to push somebody, criticize somebody. Same thing as the kid. Remember in the city, the kid said his first words, and the kid was paradigmatic. I assume you know. But the kid, his first words were, when I grow up, I want to criticize. That is the best you can hope for. And if you look around, that is, by and large, considered by those in charge of ordinary city intellectual matters, philosophers, religious apologists, social commentators, probably the crown jewel when someone appears to have some claim to being a thinker, to even sit on a small-time throne, is how can you tell? I mean, besides they dress good and they've got 2 or 3 diplomas, but let's say you never heard of their school, you never read their book. After that, if you say, well, show me, talk to me. You got the stage and the guy starts talking. How do you identify, if you're an ordinary parochial mind yourself, how do you begin to identify that the man may have some insight, that he is a thinker? Quite simple. He begins to bitch. I know they don't call it that. In the city, they try to clean up everything, which we won't go into the dung fly syndrome we've already pointed out. They will still complain, but they will call it something else. If your consciousness is limited to the same kind of cul-de-sac, the same kind of tunnel, the same kind of environment into which you were born, which is a closed system by all appearances, it is dimensionally finite. If you never leave that, the best you can ever achieve, best in many quotation marks, is a kind of critical attitude, which is just a nice way of saying you bitch, you complain. You wonder, what in the hell's going on? Why is everything arranged this way? There is no escape from it. There is no way to increase what you understand. It's just the way it is. Education has nothing to do with it. Nothing has anything to do with it except genetics. And those who don't understand that do not like it, and so I just made that up. I was running the sentence and I forgot what I was doing. I just had to say that. Luck. I should have said luck. That was close to what I meant. Yeah, luck. We'll go with luck. Luck's good. I like luck. Luck. Put down luck. Be sure, strike out in the official transcript. Make that luck, is what I meant to say was. Luck. I meant luck. It's just a matter of how luck. What a man's attempting to do, I was putting the term on originality of thought, that was beyond obviously literal thinking, as I was describing that non-linear verbal progression, or my verbal description of the non-linear progression of going from literal to metaphorical to symbolic thinking. And symbolic thinking, the most allegorical thinking you can do, the most poetically proverbial that you can do, is still not it, because you're still dealing with that which is taking place within the closed system, and your thinking. All thinking is in some manner a product of, partially captive of, the closed system. Because ordinary thought is tied directly in the same way. It makes it easier to talk about words, but thought is too. Ordinary thought is, by its very nature, linear. And therefore, it is, no matter at best, the best symbolic idea you can have, the most refined allegorical description you could have of some aspect of human life. In other words, the best shot the best man on the planet could do, dealing just with the intellect, is at the very least partially misleading, because it puts one thing after another, or else the sentence wouldn't make sense. And so there you are again, life's got its ass covered. If you say a sentence, if you say, here is the secret of life as I understand it, or here is what I believe is our most pressing problem, or here is the solution to most of our problems, and people go, all right, well listen. Either the sentence rhetorically makes some sense, grammatically, or it does not. In the former case, it is no help whatsoever. In the second case, at least it might not be misleading, but you're still left with, well, how does that help? There you are. It is, in a sense, once you see it, so plain and obvious that many people, I say this allegorically, that many people, once they begin to see it up close, they want to go maybe inside a small closet or the bathroom by themselves and inflict some sort of non-fatal harm, especially from the neck up on themselves, like, you stupid son of a bitch. I mean, in all good grace, that you're not all that hostile, but you suddenly realize, I have spent X amount of years, and fill in with, let's say, more than a decade. Let's say several decades worth of living, and you think, I have worked. As far as I was concerned, I got sharper and sharper, more and more alert. I could think more and more symbolically. But you start getting a glimpse of what all of that's about. And it, as I said, don't fear. Unless you're real aggressive, unless you're my kind, unless you're a real guy. I'm not saying that you'll actually do it, but you certainly will, if I may suggest, have a kind of allegorical inclination to take yourself out behind the barn and say, you ignorant, goddamn, and it's you, the smartest person you knew. But you realize, boy, that did me a lot of good. I had reached the point without any doubt. I'm going to give you credit that there is some, as far as it's possible within a closed system, there's something less than abject subjectivity to your comment that I was getting pretty smart. I was about as smart as anybody maybe that I'd ever met. Let me give you that. Once you see what all that's involved with, you're still left. You understand, it's no form of sham or even real humility. There's no form of self-flagellation, unless you're into that. It's just simply you realize, you dumb, ignorant son of a bitch. And yet, right up until that moment, you were probably, and I'm giving it to you, believe me, and you'll understand it all at the same time, that you were, just intellectually speaking, about as sharp as anybody on this planet, very likely. And yet, just one more little step. As those great philosophers of several years back, Brewer and Shipley said, it seemed like you just took it just one more step, and suddenly you thought you went from being probably the sharpest man in the bus station in town, that you got just one step sharper. If you want to think, assuming I'm giving you a fair description, which I don't know why I keep saying that, I give you nothing but fair descriptions. Is there you stand in the bus station, and right up to that point, you were about the sharpest man in town, and you just went too far, you went just a little bit further, and you still realize that was true, except now simultaneously, you think, you ignorant, you dumb, you dunderheaded, near blind, myopic son of a bitch, and you'd like to just put yourself perhaps in a locker and take the key and accidentally lose it, that kind of thing. Originality of thought, back to that, has several things to commend it as opposed to, let's say, just attempting to sit. One of the more classical ways of attempting, all of it's attempting, as I keep pointing out, all of the, everything called from awakening consciousness to enlightenment to some of the more public known apparent mystical aspects that seem to have little to do from a Western translation of the term, such as from the real Far East of Confucius and Lao and some of the earlier that seem to have, they use terms, and even some of the Greeks that seem to use terms having more to do with man, a political figure. That is, man in a social context, but as always I suggest to you, the people who knew what they were doing originally, they just took whatever terms seemed to be available at the time and attracted a small group of people, and they used them. So the idea of Confucius's ideal citizen, or the many writings of the Greeks, not that far removed from a contemporaneous run toward the mind, we're still writing about the same sorts of things, and even the Platonic dialogues of them apparently discussing very public and, in a sense, mundane affairs. In other words, not spiritual. They're talking about what would be a good citizen, what would be a good father, a good husband, what would be someone who was truly supportive of the state, of the collective health of man. But as surely all of you suspect by now, when those things survive, and I'm not giving credit or distracting from any of them specifically, but when something survives that long, you can always rest assured that it was closer to the feet of God to start with. You understand? It was people who understood more than they were talking about. It had to be metaphorical to begin with to last several thousand years, much less several hundred. And of course, in every part of the world, they end up being referred to, even by those who have no particular interest in them, as classical literature, classical thought. Because they were based upon, originally, ideas that were more metaphorical than literal. And it does not make one bit of difference whether those who support the idea, whether those who edit and re-edit the great books of the Western or Eastern world, those who pay lip service to it, those who even become academic experts therein. It does not matter that they have any inkling or any understanding that there was a metaphorical basis. They may have some inkling, and they may pay academic lip service there too, but as far as them having any understanding, that's like going out and finding someone that's a publicly proclaimed mystic. If you were still that dumb, and you find out, well, they don't know anything. Well, sure they don't. Why else would they publicly say they did? That's the only way you can handle it. It's show business. It's being alive. Originality of thought, even though it be impossible, literally, within a closed system, it has, I was suggesting, I could be wrong. That's why I say it's a suggestion. I suggest that it has much to favor it. I won't even say as opposed to the more static forms of meditation. I'll just say it has certain aspects that would recommend it. Several. I should cut through all that bullshit. I was going to say things like times have changed and it seems to be people less inclined to go and join a monastery. That's just filler. I don't know why I do. That's like doing the year in review. It is. Well, I shouldn't do that. For those, did everybody get, has everyone ever noticed all areas of communication, which now is sort of man's collective level of awareness and intelligence, they just love the end of the year. Not just because they get Christmas and Hanukkah presents, everybody in the news, but they can drag that son of a bitch out now, the way things have changed, into late January, that they will still say, and here it is, we've had everybody working back there, we're so proud of it here on our local station or the network or some TV news show or some magazine, into January, and sometimes pushing February, about here it is, the year in review. All it took was some guy with a pot of coffee to sit back there and they just go through stuff they've already done. All you do is edit it. Well, they put a little, da-da-da-da, and they do it from here to, it flashes and it says, the year in review is brought to you by NBC or Atlantic Magazine or whatever. You know why they love it? Of course, the News Times did not point out that there was a similarity between ordinary human recollection, memories, and the production of the year in review. The thing is, they're both so cheap to produce. All right. I sort of jogged my own memory just so I wouldn't lie to you and say what I was going to tell you about the difficulty. Originality of thought, of trying to see through the collective, whatever it is that ordinary people are thinking at the time, and to even realize that originality of thought per se is literally impossible within a closed system, as you cannot come up with something brand new. But I was going to give you 2 or 3 sort of side descriptions about why people are not interested in such, or why, if you even talk about it, and you in the beginning give a verbal egress from their landlocked sequential feelings of or necessities for logic, that you tell me in advance, well, now this is, and if we're in a closed system, there is no such thing as originality of anything. There's no originality of thought per se, literally. And then I was going to say, well, some of the things that even if you got somebody past that point, if you said, now that's got to be to some degree a given, and people go, all right, and you go, yeah, but that can't be the end of it. How else are we growing? Some little something to get them to go, all right, I'll listen for a minute. I'll entertain this in a theoretical way a bit further. And I was going to point out several of the possible explanations as to why people will not really, they might say they'll tolerate it or entertain it for a second, give you a hearing and go, okay, let's hear it. But very shortly, very, very shortly, they lose interest. Or they want to argue, or they just leave, or just lose interest. Why? And I was going to give you several explanations. But why is it? Why is originality of thought? Why is attempting to operate your own understanding on the basis of some strictly personal, individual, or from a personal individual center? Why is there no interest in that? Notwithstanding the fact that many people say they are interested in that, and those are the ones who will say to some degree they do so. And you know by now you can discount all that. But what is it that makes someone continue to stare at that screen and think it's reality and keep thinking the same things and watch it and selecting out this and that, arguing with it, and they will complain about it. And if you can get somebody just temporarily super sane enough, somewhere beyond the absolute iron grip of subjectivity, read stupidity, and say, all the complaints you have of life, all the criticisms, could you take it just for a second as again, a theoretical discussion, or just an idea, that you'll never change that? Well, it sure is a big job, even for a man of your intellectual wherewithal. It sure is a big job to change life, as you see it. They go, okay. Would you consider that there might be any useful validity to trying to change the way you look at life? Which, even I hate to say terms like that because they're fairly common, and you could get ordinary people to go, well, I do that. Yeah. There was a guy tonight in one of the news items that said he would begin to wonder that if he ever stopped his running, thinking about what was going on in life, would life continue to run on as it does? You remember that? So anything you say about originality of thought, an ordinary mind, and all you got to do is watch it in yourself, an ordinary mind will immediately find it to be velcroed almost inseparably to examples, that is, to the external world. Because the best that the ordinary mind operating within a closed system can make of the idea of originality of thought is to change its mind. What else can the mind think? Now I'm talking about the kind of intellectual operation that is binary based, that is native to, is not changed from, the manger, the meager manger, the raggedy manger into which it was born. for all of our Jewish and Christian friends, and for all of our Jewish and Christian enemies, and especially to our Jewish and Christian impartials, non-combatants, non-interested. The area into which it was born, the normal operations of the mind, if in some way you got its attention and you said, there's a great deal to be said, you could really benefit in originality of thought. And for some reason you get them going, okay, I'll think about it. And they think, what would the mind make of that? The only thing the mind can make of it, operating on the binary principle within a dimensionally finite reality, would be, well, I'll change my mind. That is not originality of thought. You could call that a method. You could call that a movement toward the train. I mean, you're not really out of Paris, much less to Istanbul. You're not necessarily on the train, but at least you could say, well, I'm doing something. And it's not that it's necessarily a waste, absolute waste of time, but for a person, for instance, if they found themselves wired up to be the intellectual cards dealt upon the table in matters political, they found themselves suddenly at the late age of 19 or 20 to be liberal in their political view. And then sometime later, a man could hear such as this, the idea of original thought, and say, well, I know what I'll do. I'll subscribe to what it is, the New Republic or the Nation, or I'll subscribe to some conservative magazine, and even though I don't agree with them, I'll read it and I'll ponder their view, and I mean, it's interesting. That's the kind of people that would say that they will perhaps go and visit a church, a synagogue, a temple of some sort that is foreign to their religious background. Now, why not? But the idea that that is originality of thought is severely misplaced. You can attempt to change your mind, you can attempt to consider other views, but you're kind of staying there, the train is there. I'll give you this much credit. Let's say that you believe that this is the great mystical Orient Express. And the steam's coming out, and they've got the thing fired up, and there are people around, and you think, well, this could be it. And it's like you're staying there, and you put a foot up, and then there are all kinds of attempts that would fit that description. And one of them would be trying to change your mind. But it would be, you'd need a little more specific, trying to consider ideas that are native to other people's mind. But that is not originality of thought. If we have verbally established that as our temporary platform philosophy, then you'd be left with this. The mind would say, well, if changing your mind, if what it is you're thinking now, if changing it is not originality of thought, then tell me this, Mr. Smarty Pants, what is? There is no explanation. Absolutely none. You've got your own self. I don't got you. You got your own self. Life has got you. Because if changing one's mind, in the full sense of the word, I don't mean it in a pejorative sense that you've suddenly underwent some sham conversion from a liberal to a conservative or from a Muslim to a Jew. I don't mean that. But if in the full sense of the word, a changing of one's mind is not the rebirth, if that is not the true resurrection, if that is not the true conversion, of which I'll suggest again that there was an original mythical and mystical, metaphorical basis to all such ideas of being reborn, resurrected, all of that. But it has to do with a man's nervous system in one lifetime. And it has to do with an individual, not a collection of people pursuing some god or philosophy. But if you accept the description for a second that no matter how you change your mind in the full sense of the word, no matter what new ideas you may adopt or how you may alter the ones you have, but change of mind would seem to be the ultimate in changing over. That whatever some significant ideas you had, significant areas of your mind, you changed. And I said, no, that's not originality of thought. And you were still attempting to be sincere. We'd go through that how many times? We'd dance around once or twice, and you'd be about ready to try and physically attack me if you had the physical wherewithal. Like, well, what the hell is it then? as far as originality of thought, does everyone understand? I could, instead of originality of thought, to the point to which I just drugged you, assume you allowed yourself to be drugged. All right, dragged. For those of you, some of you get nervous. You think we're back to spraying that kind of hypnotic stuff that I had in the air conditioning that, fogged your mind all up. Yeah, right. I know I hadn't done that lately, but I still like the idea of people being concerned that they're going out somewhere and fall in the evil clutches of some undercover Rasputin or some charismatic cult leader, and that he may in some way seduce them mentally. I just hadn't. Well, to me, it's like taking the 10-question exam of, do you have a drinking problem? If you take the exam, you don't have just a drinking problem, you got a stupid problem. Well, we had a better one. For those of you that didn't hear, right here in San Diego, was just last week, it was on the news, a guy decided to kill himself up in a condo, stuffed, newspapers around the doors and all, and even took a mattress or his bed and turned up beside his little kitchen, went in there and took in the blanket and a pillow, turned on the gas, and laid down to commit suicide, but comfortably. And he said, he was prepared to die because just life didn't go well. He was just sick of living. But he thought, well, before I go, I'll have one last cigarette, and lit it, and blew out the 12th floor of the condo. He lived. And they were taking him out. And he describes all this. He's burned. I think everybody, you know me, everybody's got the right to commit suicide. But, he was doing it for the wrong reasons. Him thinking, things don't go right. Whatever his reason was, it wasn't the right one. He should have been committing suicide because of stupidity. Back to where we were, originality of thought. Instead of me just calling it that, I could have called it such things as the awakening, the mystical experience, a higher state of consciousness, because they cannot be explained either. And then we get in, there was a connection between all that about taking a test. Like, well, can you describe it? If you got asked for it to be described, it's like worrying about, can I be manipulated? Can I fall in the hands of some, I think I want some other state of consciousness, or I think I'm seeking the great mystical grail, but I got to watch it. Thanks many people throughout history. Because what if I fell in the grasp of some mad, egotistical, egomaniacal, deranged person, and I stayed there for years, and he really, is anybody listening? And I had this great mystical aim, and what if I fell into the clutches of this deranged person and wasted all this time? If that's possibly true, do you realize you're worried about the wrong screwing thing? You need to deal with the first problem. You're dumb as shit. As far as something worse happening to you in life, from a mystic's view, there is nothing worse in life. You're ordinary. Which, for those of you who didn't think it was very funny or insightful, was a news item. Well, it wasn't meant to be funny, but it got almost nothing done. That was a guy who said, hey, I may be full of shit, but at least it's my shit. That's it. You don't need to take a test. Don't worry about whether you have a drinking problem. Don't worry about that you can't do anything right in life. Or that with all your good intentions, you've always felt the call of the gods. You felt a certain kind of whispering of the muses, of a higher consciousness, a greater spiritual development. But you've always been, being a sharp, intelligent person yourself, you've been always a bit cautious that you might fall in the hands of some evil. Because you got to strike all this evil. What you're saying is that you're so dumb that you could fall under the spell of somebody even dumber than you. Do you understand? Whatever a person's problem, whatever their fears are beyond that, they might as well take a test. They can skip the alcohol test. They can skip, would you make a good marriage partner? Or perhaps one of these employment, these professionals, like take the test and see perhaps that you should be asphalt. Maybe you're good. Find something you're more suited for. Or perhaps you would try to be weather stripping. Originality of thought, back to what I was saying, since I was using that as a term and still trying to get, or going to get somewhere else eventually, instead of just that, I could have called it the experience. I could have said, well, it is the enlightenment, would be originality of thought. But it would always be one step, one moment before that, because there is no description after that. But even up until that point, people will insist, well, if you really have some knowledge, or, of course, you don't want to hear that, but if they say, well, describe it. No. And if you say, all right, I'm going to tell you the best I can. I'm going to be fair with you. It can't be described. There's just no way to describe it. You're left still with people that find that totally the mind. The mind cannot do anything with information any more than you say, well, originality of thought is not possible. Nothing truly original is possible in a closed system. And they go, okay. And you go, and yet, if you cannot approach something resembling originality of thought, there is no hope. You'll never understand anything. It is not the end. That is not the goal, is to be original in your thinking. But, contraire, if you do not recognize that you are thinking with the cards that were on the table when you got here, and it cannot be, again, there's no way a person can be convinced of this. They can be told about it. And sometimes all it takes is one little hint. Sometimes you got to beat them over the head with it. Sometimes you got to describe it for years and years from various ways, and suddenly you want to take yourself in the bathroom and you go, damn, I should have seen that. Originality of thought being impossible, still anything less than that is not thinking at all. You are not using the human brain high enough to even approach getting on the train, to ever approach igniting consciousness to another level. Is you have to, on your own, without anybody's description, you have to on your own realize that the normal operations of the mind, again, having no better source to refer to than myself. All right, I'll be truthful. Having none I prefer. From last time was a description, a definition. A sorry waste of time, clearly defined. A sorry waste of time. That which your mind's normally up to. It just is. And if you tried that in public and someone says, well, tell me how. Assuming there's some validity to what you say, I will change. No. What your mind's normally up to. Well, specifically what? Are you talking about like in politics or the area of religion or what? And then they can say, well, that's no answer. Sure it is. Not being able to describe what this is about. Not being able to describe what Istanbul is both irritating and frustrating in a sense. I mean, if it's really irritating and frustrating, then you're in the wrong train station anyway, but I'll say that. For those of you that did get signed up as a party band, they still want you to include a couple of tearjerkers on your album anyway. Which is everybody wanting to know, boy, how much do you think Jesus actually suffered? God, that must have been horrible. Yeah, right. It would seem to be almost a form of torture for people to say, well, I am seriously interested in this. What can you tell me about it? Well, almost nothing. I can tell you, I can talk about almost forever between here and Istanbul. Now I can hang you out the window if you'll cooperate. I can put your little head out the window of the train. I can let it, hit poles as we go through Transylvania. I can hold you out by your hair for a while or one ear. I can fool around with the food they bring you inside before I say, look out the window, and I can do all kinds of things. But as far as you keep going, well, describe Istanbul. No. But everything right before you pull into Istanbul, right before the thing, right before that, everything before that, non-linearly, but everything before that has to be something approaching originality in your own nervous system. Up here, not anywhere else, not your dress, not the way you look, not your food, not your sleeping habits, not your sex habits. Of course, it's all connected, but that is not originality of thought. It is what's going on up here in your nervous system at the high end that ordinary minds believe is at least open to some degree of free exercise of choice. I refer again to that great poet, me, the tonight one entitled Choices. Choices, 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 choices. What an absolutely delightful illusion. Originality of thought is beyond any choice, is beyond any alteration of what you think. It's beyond anything that you can compare it to. Because you can compare it to something, that was simply a change of something you had already thought about. It was simply you saying, well, I'll change my mind. I will try and entertain an opposing view. Well, you can if you want to. But isn't that getting close? You want me to tell you the truth? No. Okay. Well, that's good. Sometimes children don't like to go to bed feeling blue and depressed. Sometimes they do. Originality of thought, well, I was going to say it's both, in a sense, a curse, being funny, an irritation, a source of frustration. But for those who are really born holding that ticket, once you understand, if you belong here, you were actually born holding a ticket to Istanbul. That's just a fact. You always suspect it and you're holding it. It hadn't been stamped. Just because you're holding it, that doesn't mean you'll ever get there. But if you can ever learn how to snap it, I tried to slip you in one tonight. To say what ordinary minds might call achieving some particular aim they had, very often they'll refer to it as luck. Notwithstanding or not divorcing themselves from any talent and participation in it, but they will still say, oh, it's kind of luck. Wherein in the same kind of situation as far as enlightenment, those who know, instead of luck, would say more like the inevitable. Yeah. Is it absolutely out? I'll shut up. Well, see, I was going to finish tonight on one line. Well, not finish. Do I have to stand here like this? We got another minute? They said you were out. Oh. Originality of thought. I thought you understand, can be both irritating and frustrating. Just on the basis of, I describe it, I say, hey, this is what this is all about, the enlightenment. Somebody said, well, tell me what it is. I go, well, I can't. And you can say, well, that is the ultimate frustration, except for this. Or I say originality of thought is a way to get right up there. You go, I describe that. And I go, well, you can't really describe it. And you say, well, Jesus, that's frustrating. All right, except there's another side to it. Do you understand that is the open-end method? I mean, what can be better if it has no limits and it can't be described? And yet your mind wants to go, well, damn it, tell me what it is. I can't. It is both a source, or it could be a source of frustration, or it's also that you open the present finally, and you open the box, and what's in the box is bigger than your reality. You can't describe it, but there it is. You go, well, what does this mean? How about everything squared, or at least everything plus one? That you open the box to let the present out, and the present is bigger than your reality is. Except at first you go, well, I can't describe it. You have lived in this room. Remember that? This small apartment with this huge dragon, and you just thought your room was painted green. And then one day you realize, geez, I've been living with a dragon. And you tell the dragon, pardon me, and you sit in the bathroom and you go, you stupid son.